Hey everyone, and welcome back to Mental Notes with Matt, a space for honest conversations about the thoughts, emotions, and stories that shape how we move through the world. Today's episode is one I've really been looking forward to. We're exploring a theme that's come up a lot in my own life, how our past experiences, especially the ones that leave a mark, traumas, big or small, can shape the way we see ourselves and lead us to wear masks just to feel safe, accepted, or in control. And I'm joined by someone whose insight, compassion, and clinical wisdom make her the perfect person to explore this with. Andrea Evgeniou, a licensed professional counselor who specializes in trauma-informed care, somatic healing, and helping people reconnect with their authentic selves. So we'll be diving into why we develop these emotional masks, how they show up in daily life, and what it actually looks like to begin unmasking and healing in a safe and supportive way. So, Andrea, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. And I'd love to just start by having you maybe share just a little bit about the work that you do and what brought you into the mental health space in general.
Sure. So, my name is Andrea, and I've worked in the mental health space for 16, 17 years. Started off working in community counseling, and now I'm in private practice. And right now I have my own practice. It's just me, and I do trauma counseling in person and virtually, utilizing a lot of different strategies that I've picked up along the way. But a lot of EMDR, somatic work is something that people are hugely interested in right now. DBT, ACT, some of those other fun ones.
All those acronyms, yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. What does EDMR stand for?
So it's EMDR, and it
EMDR.
stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Oh, interesting.
And basically the short of it is, we in our sessions together, we utilize something called bilateral stimulation. It could be with eye movements, but often recently it's through tapping on the body.
Mm,
And what that looks like is first we prepare through resourcing, meaning like strengthening your internal coping skills.
yeah.
And then once that feels in order, then we actually reprocess tough memories that are related to negative cognitions. And we do that through our tapping or eye movements where someone would follow my pen while we are revisiting a traumatic memory.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I feel like I have heard about the tapping method in a lot of different spaces over the years, especially more recently. Do you find that it is more successful in younger people or older people, or is it pretty consistent across the board
I
in
would
terms of
say,
effectiveness?
well, I only work with adults, but I would say in terms of the people that I work with, it's successful throughout. As
Yeah,
long as you have some buy-in and you hope that it works.
that's fair. Yeah, whatever works for
Mhm,
you specifically
mhm,
is what you should pursue, I guess, right?
mhm. Absolutely.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of wearing a mask. So what does that idea mean to you? Both personally and professionally.
Yeah, yeah. So, wearing a mask to me means that the true you is not safe to present to the world. It feels safer and more acceptable to be or act like someone else or something else. And often that is at the cost of us being authentic. And so, as a human and as a trauma therapist who sees lots of people, like I understand that the masks can be survival tools. So it's not necessarily something that we need to hate about ourselves. It's not inherently bad. It's probably what most of us are doing as we walk around day to
Hmm.
day. They're often really great adaptations, but over time they can disconnect us from our true self. And often when we're feeling like our true selves, that's when we feel happiest, when we feel best. When we're doing our thing like a podcast or playing on the floor with our kids or wearing a labubu on our our bag. uh, when we can't do those types of things, we don't feel so good inside usually.
Yeah, especially the last few months for me and building this podcast from the ground up, it really feels like I've tapped into something that even with the amount of work I'm putting into it, doesn't feel like it's going to move into any kind of burnout because it feels purposeful and it feels aligned with my values and my authenticity. And I resisted that for a very long time. I think, given my background and my experiences, there's always been this desire to have people see me in a specific way, in a positive way, and that was always at the expense of me living truthfully, and you're right. There are those moments, when you're rolling around the floor with your kids that you find that authentic joy and you're not even thinking about it. You're not impressing anybody. You're not doing anything to perform for anybody else. You're in there in the moment with that person. And that does bring a lot of genuine happiness.
Hmm.
It's tough though. It can be really, really tough to, I guess, combat those feelings. I mean, especially nowadays, it feels like we're so inundated with divisiveness and people really holding firm to their own beliefs, whether or not they're true or or whatever. How do you find the approach with people that put up those masks? That want to do the work to take them down.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, and so just to touch on one of the things you were saying, I was on TikTok the other day, and this guy posted. He seemed like this like big tough guy, but what it was a short little thing where he said like, and he had tears in his eyes. He was like, I can't believe that when I'm with my 8-month old child, I've never felt more like myself.
Mm,
I've never felt more authentic. I feel like basically I feel like the masks are all down, and there are just some people that make us feel like that. And maybe it's an 8-month-old baby, or maybe it's your neighbor, 3 doors down who we just vibe,
hmm
just right away. Just it feels safe. And safety is really important. So to go back to the question that you had, like how do we well first how do we recognize it, maybe is we kind of look at the things that maybe exhaust us, that don't necessarily bring us joy at the end of the day. And often there's something that we do called values work, where and it's this is through something called ACT. It's very popular through acceptance and commitment therapy,
mm,
but one of their big pillars is values work and doing a values inventory. And through that we kind of look at what are the things that when we do them we feel most alive,
mm,
we
hmm
feel most zest for life, we feel most safe, we're living in that like wise mind where it just feels right. You ever just do something and it just feels right?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's rare. Sometimes we don't have the opportunity to do that, but to collect those types of values, so that might be art, that might be creation, that might be curiosity, and living in those values can make it so that we can recognize and kind of live a little bit more with a mask off. Maybe not all the way, if that doesn't feel safe, but
Yeah.
more.
I mean, this idea of safety, I mean, there have been plenty of ways that I have wanted to show up authentically as myself, but haven't I have felt like the paralysis of actually following through with it. And I guess, what you're saying is I wasn't really in a safe environment. What can we do to kind of push past, I guess, the resistance? I think in my situation, it's been a lot about what I think other people are going to think, and I think that that's pretty universal. That
Mm,
a lot of people feel like,
yeah,
I'd love to be this person, or I'd love to really show my true colors, but what are other people going to think? How do you push
yeah.
past that?
Yeah, a lot of times too, that has to do with like a core belief that we
Mm,
have. So, maybe before we even do the present work, like we have to look inward a little bit and ask, like, where did I learn that? Where did I learn that if I show myself parts of myself, I'll be rejected or people will turn away? Maybe there's a belief deeply held that, I'm not safe when I'm too much or I'm not lovable. uh, when I'm loud, I have to be quiet, or when I'm happy, I have to, you know, maybe not act so happy. I remember when I was a kid, people used to call me Smiley, but not in a nice way, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
I remember like 5th grade thinking, okay, I have to smile less. I have to be less excited about things. And even like as I got older, like, I'm someone who loves to put, like, exclamation points in my emails and just kind of be a little silly, and I thought, "Oh, in the professional world, like, I shouldn't do that." But
Mm.
now I just do it. And if they don't like it, they don't like it, but I smile, I'm silly, I will use 3 exclamation points in a very professional email, and it's, you know, maybe not everyone appreciates it, but whoever does is attracted to it and sticks around.
Yes, absolutely. That's so funny. I just remembered starting at the firm I work at right now in corporate America. I've been doing that for the last 12, 13 years. Not because it's the dream to climb the corporate ladder, but becoming a new father, feeling this obligation to have something that's kind of like set in stone, guaranteed income, all that stuff. I remember joining and I had been used to starting my emails with "Hey" and the person's name, and that being called out very early on saying, it's not very professional. You should say hi or hello.
Right.
And there are so many of those moments in my life that I can track that have
Right.
crystallized in my mind, things that are just off the cuff from somebody else, but that really impacted me and continue to carry on. Because it's like, oh, this is someone that I admire or respect in some way, or feel that they are in a position that I want to aspire to. And they've given me this direction that I don't necessarily agree with, but
Yeah.
it's like, oh, maybe this is how I'm quote unquote supposed to act.
Mm-mm-mm.
And I think that over time, those things continue to kind of get layered on, and it's difficult to kind of really know who you are at the end at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, some of the environments that we're in make it so that that's a lot harder
Yeah,
to be authentic. But I mean, it can't hurt to be curious and like experiment with it and keep writing hey and see what happens.
that's true. It's true. And I've always prided myself in the corporate world being that person whose emails aren't, super professional. They're a balance between being professional but also being super approachable to people, which
Yeah.
I find to be much more attractive than
Mm,
someone
yeah.
straight to the point,
Oh,
and
yeah.
a little bit of humanity into it.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. I might have lost the last question that you gave me.
No, not at all. This is the whole point. I love going off on tangents. That just means that, things are resonating for both of us. And I guess how does someone even start to realize that they're wearing a mask? Like what are the signs? Some people maybe you've spoken to in sessions don't even realize that that might be one of the things they need to explore more.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So a lot of times it's burnout, and so that could be social burnout, that could be burnout at work, and that burnout might, lead to exhaustion or sadness. Also, like taking a look at what the internal dialogue is. Often, if we're doing a lot of comparison type thoughts, we can pretty much guess that you're probably, masking a little bit as we compare ourselves to others. And recently, I think it's so much easier to do that with, well, we've all been on social media for a long time now, but just in this world, it's really easy to compare ourselves often to the people around us. But, I think once we wear the mask for too long, it becomes super heavy,
Hmm.
and you know something is off. Maybe you're not attracting the right people. Again, going back to the safety thing, it might lead to constantly feeling unsafe, constantly feeling triggered. It's a lot of energy to utilize to have to hold up that armor, that mask for so long, that even just being in our body doesn't feel safe. Like, to not feel safe in your own nervous system is just one of the worst things.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's exhausting for sure. You're right, and I think that the longer that I've gone kind of having this mindset of I need to do X, Y, and Z in order to be quote unquote successful or earn a certain amount of money. All these things are are kind of at the expense of living the life that I think would make me happiest at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, obviously, bills got to get paid, and if you've got a family, you've got to help to support your family. There are obvious trade-offs, but you're right. I mean, all those times of spending hours and hours of your energy kind of fitting into that mold. So many times I've come home at the end of the day and I just, want to curl up into a ball because it's like, God, I had to carry all of that the entire day, and now I'm alone. I can let it all go, but that's very lonely, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And it's, who do we talk to about that? We often don't want to like feel like we're burdening our partners or our loved ones because maybe they're doing their own masking or their own hard work. So you know, it can feel really isolating and alone. But at the same time, I think most of us are doing it on some level
Yeah,
because probably we have to.
right.
But I don't know about you, but I always felt more comfortable or more happy, more excited when I'm around people that are like, when someone's acting like
Yes,
who they are. Like you could
yes.
just tell when they
That's
walk into
that's a
a room.
blessing. Yeah, that's a blessing and a curse. Being an empathetic person or being,
Yeah.
someone that's kind of intuitive. You see, I mean, you see very clearly when they're putting on something, and that can be
Mhm.
incredibly frustrating. But you're right. I mean, there are people that you come across, and it's like everything clicks, and you know right away that's your person. It's a person you
Mhm.
want in your life. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and it might be the people that we don't see very often, but when we do, it's like, you know, you're just everything melts away. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to stand so straight, and it just feels so easy. And it's so nice, to have to seek those people out. I think that's part of it, like seeking those people out that when you are do show glimpses of yourself, like they appreciate it, they like it, or they're neutral about it. They're like,
Yeah.
that's just my friend, and I love them regardless. So, and then finding safety within. I think it's also not just finding safe, co-regulating with other people is so important. We can't forget that. A lot of times my clients want to do it all on their own, but I'm like, sorry, unfortunately, we're human, so we're going to need other people to help us through this. But also building some internal resources, and maybe that's through grounding skills, or maybe that's through noticing our self-talk and maybe talking to ourselves a little bit more compassionately.
Yeah. Do you find that people gravitate toward one thing more than others? I mean, are there tools that you try to, share with people that you find to be super effective?
Mhm. In terms of internal resourcing,
Yeah,
internal.
and changing the narrative, I guess.
Oh, okay. Yeah, change. Yeah. Honestly, and people hate it at first, but it's self-compassion.
Yeah,
People do not feel comfortable validating themselves or saying, "Hey, Andrew, you had a tough day. It makes sense that you're not feeling so hot right now." Or even, going as far as to saying like, "You did a good job," or, "Maybe you're a good person." So people are often pretty self-critical, and it
hmm,
doesn't feel natural for them to give themselves compassion. But often that's like the it's like the secret
yeah,
to moving forward with almost anything, I think, but especially with anything in therapy, but especially like the unmasking part.
yeah.
So it's
It's
work.
interesting because we talk to the people we love in our life, and when they have problems, I feel like it's easy for us to give them grace, but it's a lot more difficult to look yourself in the mirror and do the same thing for yourself. I've seen a couple of threads over the years of people saying stuff like, I mean, Mel Robbins is a good example. I mean, I saw something that she said recently where she literally goes into the bathroom in the morning, puts her hand up on the mirror, looks at herself and says, I love you,
Mhm.
and it's like it seems so silly. And maybe it would feel that way for a little while, but I think that our brains really are so plastic, and we have the ability to rewire in a way that gets you to a place that maybe you feel a little bit more comfortable being you and being a little bit more comfortable not apologizing for that. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do we talk to ourselves like the mean boss, the critical boss who now we don't want to feel like ourselves when
Hmm.
we're around them, or do we talk to ourselves like the type of management that you like to practice, or it's open and it's casual and your heart feels open, and the way we talk to ourselves really matters.
Absolutely. So, how do you support clients who are beginning that process of unmasking? I mean, what makes it feel safer to peel back the layers?
Yeah, so I think it's, well, at least in therapy, it's finding a therapist who you feel comfortable
Yeah.
being vulnerable around. Just this week I had a client who said, for whatever reason, maybe it's just on vibes alone, but she's never felt so vulnerable with a therapist. And if we're not that you need to be, completely like hard on your sleeve, but in order to do harder work, you need to feel comfortable with the person that you're opening up to.
Yeah.
So I think when we're talking about in the therapy room, you want to find someone who m- maybe, even if it happens over time, but often you feel it right away, that you feel okay with them, you feel comfortable with them.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty apparent very quickly if it's someone that you'll have, chemistry with, and that you feel comfortable with. I have a few people in my life specifically who have told me numerous times that therapy doesn't work for me. Therapy doesn't work for me. I've tried it. I've tried it. I've met with people, and that just makes me think that they haven't been paired with the right person. But even that process was when someone's going through so much stuff to
Yeah.
also feel like you have to do the extra work of finding the person that could maybe help you, move down this, through this
Hmm.
journey can be really difficult. I mean, do you have any advice for people that are resistant to therapy because of situations where, they haven't been able to find the right person?
Yeah, well, I absolutely don't blame them
Yeah.
because I think I've had that experience myself. When
Hmm.
I was 18, I lost someone really close to me in an accident, and my parents tried to send me to a therapist. And so I don't know what type of research was available back then, but they tried. And the therapist that they sent me to, actually, she did EMDR, but I didn't know what that was back then.
Hmm.
And so just right away, she was like tapping and like moving a pen around. And I love cats, but there was like 6 cats in the room with us at all times. And she was a lot older, which right now I love to have an older therapist. That
Yeah.
wisdom is unmatched. But at that point in my life, it didn't work. So, I ghosted her. I've ghosted therapists before when I was younger, like 3 or
Hmm.
4. I feel bad about it now, but yeah, I think sometimes we just get desperate enough where we're just like, okay, let me just try it again. But it really does make a difference. I think about the just like people, like friends, like you're not, or just people you meet on a daily basis. You're not going to like everyone, and it's a shame because we get excited, we want to be vulnerable with this new person, and when we can't, like that hurts. That
Yeah,
often, like, that sent me on a shame spiral one time that it was really hard to come back from. So I get it, and maybe therapy, they're not ready for it. I
right.
I wouldn't push them towards it, but I would just say, just like, we meet someone on the street and we like them or we don't like them. Unfortunately, you have to not date, but you have to kind of like swipe left or right when it comes to the therapist too to find.
Yeah,
But once you find someone, it's just it could be a little magical.
for sure. It's funny because I recently had an experience where I kind of just judged a book by its cover, and you know, I feel like that's something to be mindful of also
Yeah.
when you start maybe a session, even like the first session with a therapist. I think coming from an acting background, I mean, the first 15, 20 seconds of being in the presence of somebody else, you've basically sized up who you think they are. You assume pretty much everything. I was at a restaurant wasting time when my kids were at a class, and this guy came in that was like real Italian guy, super direct and blunt, kind of like talking to the bartender in a way that made me uncomfortable. And after about 25 minutes of like him with, hearing his conversation with his wife and just I'd already made up my mind I don't like this guy. And then I was scrolling through my phone, and he looked over at me, and he was like, "Hey, you want a meatball?" Like he
Oh,
wanted to share one of his appetizers, and I was like,
yeah, you
"No,
got
no,
it.
I'm okay, thanks, thanks." But he insisted, and so I took it, and we ended up having this hour-long conversation. Couldn't be nicer.
There you
Got to know him
go.
a little bit better, and it was just a really great experience and a good lesson for me to realize, like,
Mhm.
it's not all that you think it is, and that I think that translates in life in general.
Oh, yeah,
You know?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Just to be like, just in the moment, to just play around with like, what if I let my guard down like just a little bit? Let me give this person a chance. Yeah, a lot of times it's not the people that look just like us
Yeah.
that are gonna help us most. Maybe it's the people who are a little, different, have a little bit of a different vibe to them. But
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I remember what my last therapist, she's very quiet and she's very reserved. And I thought, I don't know if this is gonna work out, but I needed that because she was so grounding and she was so kind and she was just someone that just no matter what I said, like that's how she was, she just stayed
Yeah.
with me, stayed in the moment. She didn't have to make jokes like I do in
Yeah.
session. Like she was just who she was. And I really loved that. I love her for that.
Yeah. That's a great insight about maybe do something that's a little bit uncomfortable.
Hmm.
You don't have to go 0 to 60. Maybe there's one thing that you can do to let
Hmm.
your guard down in a small way and then kind of build from that,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Even in when we're practicing authenticity, I think you have that right too. Like just experimenting. Like if I show a little bit of this about myself, what does that feel like? Or well, how is that welcomed? Is it welcomed well? What circles is it welcomed?
Hmm. And what are the ultimate consequences of that,
Yeah,
because it's not
consequences
going to kill you. Eh,
and or benefits.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I think it's easy for us to kind of skew to the negative in most things. It's just
Hmm.
a protective measure for us,
Yeah.
you know. Can you share anything about your own personal journey with authenticity or identity or healing and whatever you're comfortable sharing?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think when as we attempt to walk into our authenticity, I've noticed, well, it gets easier as you're older, as you become older.
Hmm.
So that I like. For like a younger 20-year-old, like maybe that's a lot harder and maybe it's not possible yet for them, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe setting boundaries feels hard. Maybe they live in a home where they're unable to do that. It just maybe it's not even efficient. Maybe it's just not efficient to unmask. Maybe you don't want to disappoint people. Maybe you don't want to say no. Maybe that all feels really terrifying. But for me, like as I get older, that feels so much easier to be unapologetically me.
Yeah.
So I think luckily or unfortunately or fortunately for some, like I think with age, that's how I've felt like a little bit more myself. Having kids, I know sounds weird, but it's just I just love having kids. I just
Yeah.
love it. It's just so fun. I love being with them and I love being myself around them and I think, on the flip side, though, like I feel like I've some of those friendships that maybe weren't so, I wasn't so myself, have slipped away,
Hmm.
and I kind of miss those, but at the same time, maybe they just weren't right for me. So there's also maybe some grief there when we're walking in alignment with our values because maybe our
Yeah.
life is going to start to look a lot different.
That's very scary. That's very
Yeah.
scary to live your life in a certain way, surrounded by certain people, and get the cues as you get older to maybe let some people go because it's not fulfilling you. It's not really aligned with who you are becoming or would like to become. It's very scary because, like you said, you don't know where that's gonna end up or what your life will look like if you strip away this stuff that's kind of built the foundation of who you've thought you were gonna be or who you are. You
Oh my
know,
gosh, 100%,
you know.
100%. Yeah, that's like such a strange awakening. Yeah.
It is. It is. It's very, very tough. There have been people that I've let go of over the years, and people that I knew I needed to let go of, but they were definitely very, very safe in my life. They made me feel in certain moments like I could be my authentic self, but they still weren't aligned with the values and how I
Mm,
saw the world. So it's weird. It's a
yeah.
kind of trade-off, I guess, or it was a trade-off in a lot of situations where I
Mm,
craved that kind of validation and understanding from someone that I
mm,
knew wasn't ultimately a good influence on my life, you
mm,
know?
yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's easier to just not acknowledge those things,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, maybe we don't feel so good when
Yeah,
we're
you
with.
can sweep things under the rug for a
Yeah.
long time, but that dirt pile is just going to get bigger and
Mhm,
bigger,
mhm.
you know?
And I think for me too, it was just mm, really learning how to regulate my nervous system. I think, like, I remember the first time I tried mindfulness, where in mindfulness it asks you to be with your thoughts, be present, like be in your body. I had a giant panic attack in the training, and I had to leave because I had never like felt safe in my body. Like I've never
Yeah.
even tried to feel safe in my body. And if you're not feeling safe in your body, you can't regulate. You're acting in a way that is creating more threat to yourself. It's hard to do anything. So it's hard to heal in any way. So for me too, like when I healed, when I learned how to pendulate, like I'm feeling really anxious, but how can I soothe myself? When I learned that myself, it was easier to then translate it into practicing authenticity, that fear that of threat with then, okay, didn't work out, I'm soothing myself. Or it did work out and I'm like, yay, I'm gonna like celebrate the glimmer.
Hmm.
So that for me it was important too.
Yeah. So I was doing a little bit of studying up on your background and everything. I know that you also specialize in ADHD, and that's something that I've suspected my whole life that I had, and I was recently diagnosed. So it's something that I've really been delving into
Wow.
and trying to understand better. And
Mm.
I gather that there's a spectrum like anything else, and it makes a lot of my past make more sense. But it's definitely, it's a blessing and a curse, kind of understanding that, but also understanding the limitations that I just thought were a normal part of life. What's your perspective on ADHD?
Oh my gosh. ADHD and masking go hand in hand. Like,
Yeah,
because you learn from a really young age that your behavior is unacceptable in most environments. And that can feel really upsetting. A lot of times, like, we develop like a really weird self concept. Our confidence is shot. We're masking, 8 hours a day while we're in school, when really inside we want to jump around or we want to say this or we want to do this. But if we show that part of ourselves, oh, you're sitting in the hallway. Nope. Go in the office.
yeah,
Nope. Stop talking. And even from the people we love, like there's a lot of criticism, because they're having to constantly like, bring us back in or help us curb a behavior. And so if we don't, and if for someone who's undiagnosed, at least when you're diagnosed, there's a reason. Like, but if you're undiagnosed and you find
yeah,
out when you're an adult, it's like you've gone all these years just thinking that you're broken, there's something
yeah,
wrong with you, and having a lot of criticism along the way, and masking an ADHD.
yeah.
It's huge.
I mean, it comes with so much anxiety, which I've come to understand is also a part of, the criteria in there and why it can kind of be misdiagnosed or confused.
Mm-mm.
But I recall, I mean, after getting diagnosed, I did an inventory of so many moments in my life where I was like, oh, just, being in high school, being in the hallway and having all of these like thoughts of pre-planning, when I go down this hallway, I need to go in this direction, or this person's going to be there, so maybe I need to figure out what I'm going to
Mm.
say. Those types of things I feel like
Yeah.
that always felt normal to me, but it's always been very, very strange. I like feeling like I need to be 3 steps ahead. And it's interesting too, because I think that there have been points in my life where people have accused me of being, narcissistic or gaslighting. And I think that that comes from a place of them seeing me trying to be a version of myself in every moment in order to make sure everything is going to be okay and the least amount of drama or conflict. And that I think has come off in some ways to people as me trying to manipulate, and that's never been the intention, So that's also difficult. And then trying to strip away that idea of wanting to have everybody get along also feels inauthentic of who I am. So it's a constant kind of push and pull of all this stuff, which has been really, really difficult, I think, to manage, and that I think a lot of people probably experience.
Wow.
You
Yeah.
know,
Well, you definitely touched on something there. The people pleasing mask
100%.
is one of everyone's favorite mask to put on. And you're right. I think with all of that attempt at control, unfortunately, it does eventually become manipulate. I've done it. Like I was a people pleaser.
Yeah.
All I was doing was manipulating. I was just manipulating this person, manipulating this situation because I needed to just create a sense of safety for them
Yes.
and for myself. And that is very exhausting.
It's too exhausting. It's not sustainable.
No.
And so luckily I feel like now that I've been formally diagnosed, uh, there's been a lot more clarity in the things that I feel like I need to do right now to tap into my authenticity and kind of get rid of the need for validation from people. And I think that that's going to be a struggle for a long time, but again, doing these small things that make you a little uncomfortable in hopes that that's going to compound over time, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah, yeah, and just one more thing, if you end up doing any values work, kind of you could do your own values inventory. I do want to give like a little anecdotal story where
Please.
one of my someone I was working with had a corporate job and they were making great money, but they often didn't feel good at the end of the day, didn't feel happy with themselves. And so we did the values sort. And one of the items that came up, we did like a top three, was beauty. I was like surprised because this person seemed very just, not so concerned with that part of life in the
Yeah.
way that I was looking at it. So we did the exercise and we talked about ways that they might practice living in that and whatever values that they chose. And then they came back the next week and said that they practiced the beauty value. And so I was very curious to see like how they practiced that. And they shared that when they were cooking, they cut their carrots in a way that was really visually appealing. And they did things like that throughout the day
Ah,
to create beauty in their life in small ways. And for that person, doing that made them feel really good inside, made them feel authentic. So,
I
so
love
there are
that.
even small things, small things that you could do, which might feel even less vulnerable,
Hmm.
doing them in front of someone or with someone that you could do on your own. The way you cut your carrots, even something small like that.
Yeah. I love that. That's amazing. All right, so before we close out, what do you hope someone listening takes away from this kind of work that you do, which I think is super important, by the way?
Mhm. Yeah, well, I think in terms of the masks that we wear, I think we like they're look at it from a non-judgmental stance because these are often like really brilliant adaptations that wow, from a really young age you figured out. You're 7 and you figured out like how to people please, how to manage everyone in the household, how to be the comedian, how to be the caretaker, how to be the chameleon. Wow, like, that is amazing. That what an adaptation that is.
Sure.
So I think approaching it from a place of compassion, understanding, and then curiousness, what happens if I try this and it feels really good? Maybe I could do a little bit more of that, sprinkle it into small things that I do. You don't have to go like all the way with it, like maybe you don't have to, you know, I like Labubus. I mean, I don't have to go and dress like a Labubu, or maybe I could if I want to, but I don't have to.
Yeah.
Go walk around the mall as a Labubu. But playing around with it. Like seeing what happens, being curious, and
Yeah.
maybe finding a good therapist. or finding good people that make it easy for you to do that, a little bit easier.
Curiosity as opposed to criticism and shutting something down immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it in a different lens, from a different perspective, a different lens. Be curious
Mm-hmm.
about it as opposed to resisting it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for joining me, not just for your time, but for showing up with such a grounded presence and insight. I mean, the conversation gave me a lot to think about, and I hope it did the same for anyone listening. So if you're out there feeling like you've been shape-shifting or performing just to survive, I hope that this episode reminds you that you're not alone and that healing doesn't mean becoming someone new. It's about coming home to who you've been all along. You can follow Andrea's work on Instagram at Andrea_Evgeniou, and I'll drop her info in the show notes as well. And thanks for listening to Mental Notes with Matt. If this resonated with you, share it with someone you love, and make sure to subscribe for more conversations like this. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you.